Today, we're going to talk about a really important IP that is sadly slowly disappearing into obscurity with each passing year. That is, as the title of this video indicates, Vampire Hunter D. I call it an IP because although most people only know it as an anime, it's actually much more than that. Before I get ahead of myself though, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in retrospectives about stuff like this, classic RPGs, and lots more. Vampire Hunter D was originally conceived by Japanese sci-fi horror novelist Hideyuki Kikuchi, with the first book releasing all the way back in 1983, 2 years before I was even born. The story takes place in our own world, but far into the distant future. To be specific, the year 12,090 AD. It's a post-apocalyptic setting that's really unique, blending aspects of both Gothic horror and the American Old West. Mankind is dwindling, and the race of vampires are joined by monsters, mutants, and other creatures with things like guns, swords, robotic horses, and magic all playing a part. It's really kind of a melting pot of components that shouldn't all work together, but somehow they just do. It's really awesome. The central character known as D is a half-human, half-vampire, a loner and a powerful warrior rejected by both races who has committed to side with humans and work as a sword-for-hire hunting and killing vampires. Although it's never expressly stated anywhere in the canon, as far as I know, it's heavily implied that D is actually the son of the original Count Dracula, who they just refer to in this world as the Sacred Ancestor. Now, a stoic character of very few words such as this could easily become boring, but that's where the original author's creative genius comes in. You see, D has a constant companion, a magical entity simply called Left Hand, which is exactly what it sounds like, a literal sentient face on D's left hand that can talk, use the elements to assist him in combat, and most importantly consume the immortal souls of the vampires that D defeats. Left Hand is loud, witty, and obnoxious, a perfect foil to the main character he's forever attached to. The funny thing is that the author doesn't bother to explain much about what Left Hand is or how he came to be fused with D, and I kinda love that. Not every interesting aspect of a story has to make sense as long as it's plausible in the world it exists in. D has become somewhat of an icon in pop culture, and especially in anime culture, but as I mentioned before, is slowly fading from the public eye, which is a real shame, as the IP has a long and robust history. Believe it or not, there are actually over 40 novels in the main series as of the making of this video, and well over 50 if you include special editions and a few side projects. But despite the absolutely gargantuan amount of source material, Vampire Hunter D has only enjoyed a few brief moments in the spotlight during its nearly 45-year history. Although the series has enjoyed things like manga adaptations and radio dramas, as I stated before, D is most famous for his 2 anime outings. I discovered anime when it was still a relatively unknown subgenre of entertainment, in the mid-90s, well before it exploded in the West. I sort of stumbled upon it thanks to the Final Fantasy franchise, which my brothers and I were obsessed with at the time, thanks to the likes of Final Fantasy 2 and 3, otherwise known as 4 and 6, on the Super Nintendo. I learned there was some sort of Final Fantasy cartoon, and when I sought it out, found Legend of the Crystals, a sequel to Final Fantasy V. I've done a whole video on that one, so click above if you're interested to learn what that is and my experiences with it. I tell you this story though because it plays into my discovery of Vampire Hunter D in a somewhat poetic way. You see, because of my love for Final Fantasy, I was already familiar with the legendary Japanese artist Yoshitaka Amano. whom I've talked about several times on this channel. Amano was the concept artist for the Final Fantasy franchise and, as such, had his art all over the promotional material and strategy guides for Final Fantasy 2 and 3. My own illustration career started with me tracing those pictures in the guidebook and imitating his art style as best I could. So once I wandered by chance into the world of anime, it wasn't long before I caught a glimpse of Vampire Hunter D, and immediately recognized his design as the works of my favorite artist. You see, Yoshitaka Amano was the illustrator for Kikuchi-san's novels too, before he even got involved in Final Fantasy. If you ever want to go down a deep but worthwhile rabbit hole, start searching up all of the Vampire Hunter D artwork for the novels. They are truly a one-of-a-kind blend of beauty and horror, which is exactly how I would explain the series itself. In fact, I happen to own one of the Vampire Hunter D art books simply called kan, which is the Japanese word for coffin. It's got these unique chunky dimensions, and along with a complete collection of all the incredible D artwork, features a short story called Portrait of Isabel, which just so happens to be the very first piece of Vampire Hunter D literature to ever grace the English language. Believe it or not, translations of the main novels didn't start releasing in English until 2005, over 20 years after the original publications kicked off in Japan. So, after finding out what Vampire Hunter D was, I of course soon got my hands on the VHS tape of the original film. By this time, I was about 15 years old, and let me just say, I was not ready for what I was about to watch. Let's put it this way, it's got some moments that are quite intense. The film was released in 1985, the year I was born, and is based on book 1 of the series. It's actually a pretty faithful retelling of the novel, and given that it does a decent job at bringing Amano's artistic vision of D to life, it goes without saying that I was drawn in right away. The gloomy opening scene is accompanied by the first notes of a strange but captivating soundtrack, which I still listen to often to this day. I was good with all of that, but the movie showed me a level of extreme violence I had never before seen in animation. Anime is no stranger to showing flowing blood or even limbs flying off, of course, but Vampire Hunter D took it to an almost laughably extreme level, with one particular scene showing someone's head exploding in graphic, fully detailed slow motion. Anyway, while I can say I did enjoy the film and became a new fan of the series, it wasn't exactly something that became part of my daily viewing routine. What it did do, however, is put me in exactly the right place, at exactly the right time, to be ready for when the second film in the series came out, which was just a few years later in the year 2000. How lucky was it that a long-awaited sequel to a 15-year-old film came out right as I discovered it? This one would be called Vampire Hunter D: Bloodlust. For some reason, it's based on the third novel called Demon Death Chase, though there is one particularly awesome scene that references the events of Book 2 in a really interesting and powerful way. But don't worry, no spoilers here. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Unlike the first film, which was pretty unbalanced in tone, pace, and graphic content, Bloodlust is, in my opinion, a nearly perfect movie. It changes a few things from the book, but all of the tweaks only help to make it more structurally sound and consistent. It follows Dee on a mission to pursue and recapture a noble's daughter who was taken captive by a vampire. Run-ins with other hirees on the same mission, and the creatures guarding the vampire kidnapper make for an action-packed adventure, but it's also rich with really meaningful themes, and an epic ending scene that will leave you reflecting on it for a long time after. There are some truly great twists and turns that complicate the plot further, but in case you haven't seen it, I'll just leave it there for now. Believe me when I say this movie is an absolute masterpiece, and one of the most beautiful pieces of animated art I've ever seen. How this film is not constantly talked about in and out of the anime scene is baffling to me. Even now, 25 years later, I stand stunned at the animation quality. Every single frame looks like a carefully crafted oil painting. Character movement is fluid, the action scenes are stellar, and the soundtrack, oh my goodness, the soundtrack has to be amongst the best of any film, period. Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust is unique too, in that the original script was first written in English and animated to match that, with the Japanese dub coming later. It also features a pretty robust cast, including the likes of John DeMita and Mike McShane as Left Hand. My discovery of this film was the point I became fully invested in the series and the character. The magic of Bloodlust was just too strong to resist, and I went looking for more from what the IP had to offer. Sadly, there wasn't much. The two films were basically the end of the road for Western audiences. But there was one more thing coming later that same year that I was aware of, thanks to my subscription to my favorite PlayStation editorial, PSM. A Vampire Hunter D video game based on the new movie was on the way to the PlayStation. And yes, that's PlayStation 1 because I'm old. Needless to say, I was pumped for this. For those of you that were in the know, D getting his very first video game was kind of a big deal. But unfortunately, it hit the market with mixed reviews, to put it nicely. It was an interesting formula that I thought was a good fit for the game. It was simply called Vampire Hunter D, and takes place mostly in the Castle of Chaith, the set piece for the finale of the movie. Just like the early Resident Evil games, it was built on an engine that sported 3D character and enemy models against 2D pre-rendered backgrounds. Also like Resident Evil, it was a mix of action combat and puzzle solving, and even sported the same tank controls for D's movement. All in all, the since bankrupt developer Jaleco was never exactly expected to churn out AAA quality, but as a fan of the series and a young teenager, I actually thought it was pretty awesome. Maybe it was just the novelty of actually being able to control a rendition of D, but I remember quite enjoying my time with the game. And you know me, nostalgia building over the years has only deepened the hue of my rose-tinted glasses. If you're not picky with retro game gimmicks, or if you're a big fan like I am, maybe think about giving it a try. Well, it's been 25 years since then, and Vampire Hunter D is in more need of a resurgence than ever. Aside from all the novels finally getting translations, which, don't get me wrong, is fantastic, there really hasn't been much love given to the series beyond that. I don't really know how popular the series is monetarily speaking, so maybe it just doesn't make the money it needs to justify more. Regardless, Vampire Hunter D means a lot to me personally. The sights and sounds of its two movies are a big part of my experience growing up, and it represents in part the beginning of my pursuit of art. That's both illustration, as I mentioned earlier, but also writing. I've been an author for about 15 years, and currently have a work in progress that is very loosely based on the adventures of D. Basically just make D a monk and replace all the vampire elements with martial arts. We'll see if it ever gets finished. The D series was also a special part of the relationship I had with my cousin, who was one of my best friends until he unexpectedly passed away a few years ago. I still remember getting dropped off at the mall for the afternoon and spending hours with him searching for the PlayStation game so we could play it all that night. The mission was a success, and it was a memory I'll cherish forever. So, the legacy goes on, but it's been way too long since D was in the spotlight in any big way. I would kill for another movie or proper video game. Can you imagine a Vampire Hunter D game that looked like Elden Ring or the Resident Evil remakes? What about a Netflix series like they did for Castlevania that could cover ground from the book timeline more efficiently? For now, I guess I'll just have to be content with the couple of pieces of D history that I do have. novels 1, 2, and 3, the Coffin art book we talked about earlier, which is so cool, and my original Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust DVD from the turn of the millennium. And let's not forget the PlayStation game. Right, so you're obviously looking at my virtual version, which I house in my VR retro bedroom. I don't know whatever happened to the physical disc I had. By the way, since this channel is all about nostalgia, we have nostalgia sleepover streams every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night where we play classic games together and reminisce about the golden years. Maybe we'll give old D a replay soon, huh? Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And that will do it, folks. Share your thoughts and memories about Vampire Hunter D down in the comments, and I'll see you next time. As always, we need to shout out our lovely channel members that you see on screen here. Another huge thank you goes out to the channel's superfans, Sonny Carter, Craig Stratton, and Jason Awesome Vods. If you'd like to become a member, simply hit the join button below this video or on the channel's homepage.